Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of Global Payroll Question Time. I'm Victoria Bell, the Deputy Editor of Reward Strategy. Thank you all for joining us. This session explores how utilising earned wage and pay on demand requires payroll professionals to become key to decision making and creates an opportunity for elevated status. We'll explore earned wage access versus early wage access and payroll's role in making a positive impact on their employees' and colleagues' well-being. Our panellists for this session are Ted, Wendy, Matthew and Anna. Let's kick off with a question. Don't forget to submit any questions you have via Slido, and let's kick off. Should people have access to their wages early? Is that time between payments there for a reason? Let's start off with Wendy.
Oh, well, I love it, right? I love being able to access it. I like control, so I want to control. I don't want to sit in my employer's bank account. I want to sit in my interest account. So on a personal note, that's my view. But I think, yes, why not give control to the employees? Employee experience is becoming so important to attract people into an industry. And, the reason that we've had payroll with batch processing and legacy is because of the limitations that we had, with the old IBM technology software when, Ceridian actually was an original byproduct of the IBM payroll processing. So, the legacy technology that we had as an organization was our formation as a business is part of the reason why we have the process we have in the industry today. And, as we've launched, as we think about on-demand pay and access to net earned salary, using that and leveraging that as an opportunity to attract people into your organization and retain them, I think is a really important benefit. And I recently read in an EY study that EY estimates that on any given day, $1 trillion is locked in payroll systems across the US and other leading countries. So imagine freeing that capital up and putting that into the hands of employees in an easier way, what impact that would have for wellness and well-being across employees that have already earned that. So, from our perspective, we launched Dayforce Wallet, which is an extension of our real-time calculation of payroll. So at any given time, people can access what they've already earned on that day. So I could calculate what I've earned already today. And if I wanted to buy a coffee rather than put it on my credit card, I could leverage what I've already earned today. And so, having that flexibility of choice is something that we've also seen research. Yeah, we did a survey last year that said that 71% of UK employees between the ages of 18 and 44 would like to have early access to earned wages with zero cost to them, and that they would feel more valued as an employee. And so hearing those data points, I think, having access to that, we should listen to what the employees are looking for.
Of course. Ted.
I've got a slightly different perspective on this in a sense. I think that there's the misconception that early wage access is something new. It's been around for decades. People have used payday loans, they've used Wonga, they've used all these different ways of doing it. And coming back to the payroll industry's sort of performance in this area, it's only now that the payroll industry has grabbed it. It's done responsibly, it's done linked to how much you actually earn. It can be done cheaply, it can be done in a technologically efficient way. And I just see this as the beginning of the journey. So typically the drawdown is sort of 50 to 100 pounds. Whilst I think in due course it would just be you've worked a day, you get paid a day, and the working capital conundrum is easy to overcome, and it's self-financing, etc. So I think that this is just the start of a very exciting journey that payroll has to be central to.
Of course. Matt, what do you think? Is this the start of a journey, or?
I think in the UK we're very early in this journey. From what I understand, it's been incredibly popular in America for quite some time, but the attitudes towards access to wage and as sort of Wendy said, the employers holding on to that wage is slightly different than it is here in the UK. I'm not sure quite how popular it is in the UK yet, but there's certainly a lot of talk about it, and whether that translates into us seeing it become much more of a growing trend, and we'll probably talk more on this, an expectation of employees remains to be seen.
Anna?
I agree with what everybody said in the panel, and I think another point I wanted to add to this is if we look at the gig economy, they've had access to earned pay every day for quite some time now, and I think we will see a trend where we're going to have to align as organisations, we're going to have to bring the pay as an employee level with workers from the gig economy. So I think that's going to be another factor that's going to push earned wage access further, I think, as a trend.
Why do you think pay on demand is getting more popular in the UK?
We've had conversations about this. My view is we now live in this instant gratification world, right? If we want something, you order it. Sometimes it comes today, sometimes it comes tomorrow. It's not something that I grew up with, not something that I was familiar with 20 years ago. You know, we lived in a world before where we had to wait for things and there was an expectation that you'd have to build up to something. Whereas I think nowadays where we want everything to happen almost immediately, and I think that's having a huge impact with the younger generation, as we were talking about earlier. You know, getting a like immediately as soon as they post something. You know, it was for me talking to my friend in Switzerland, I had to send a letter and wait 2 weeks. You know, so you know, me expecting to be paid, every day or really quickly was not, you know, something that I could contextualize and comprehend. But I think nowadays, you know, we do live in this fast world where everything happens really quickly, and I think it's natural that this is picking up pace. I think the current economical climate is putting a pressure on people being able to access their pay quickly to pay their bills, whereas before maybe they had to go to payday loans or credit cards and so on. So I think there's lots of pressures from everywhere, and I think, yeah, it is going to, you know, continue.
Wendy, what are your thoughts on that?
I was just actually going to build on Anna's point, because I remember, like, when I was growing up, my parents got paid weekly. And it wasn't so long ago that, you know, I think the payroll industry here in the UK, I certainly remember 10, 15 years ago that there was this massive trend of organizations that were weekly paid moving to monthly paid, because actually it was, you know, it was easier for the operational team and payroll, and it was, you know, if they were working with a bureau, it was a cheaper opportunity for them to save money and save on paper and all those benefits for that business case at the time. And so I think, for me, I think that, you know, it's normal and typical now in the UK that you're paid monthly. But actually, if you do have something that's accessible at any given point, then, you know, you enable people, if they want to be paid weekly, doesn't have the impact on the payroll operational team. They know that they're only getting access to what they've earned already. There's no risk of overpayment. There's no risk of, you know, any detriment to the payroll. There's no risk in the cash flow, and it's free to employees. And so, you know, it's a new concept, is a very different thing to some of those, the advance payment and then the reconciliation or the rework, or, you know, drawing down from a provider that's going to charge you. I think it was recently stated with Tesco that they're charging their employees to be able to have that. The concept of what we've launched in the UK, we're trying to address that in a market where conditions of cost of living is going up. You know, people are struggling from payday to payday. So actually giving that level of flexibility, and also helping our customers that, you know, we work with a lot of healthcare organizations, and, you know, for them to have to, you know, the opportunity then to advertise a shift and then get somebody that's within their organization to be able to do that shift, get paid at the end of that shift automatically, that actually is making massive benefits in costs that they would have typically went to bank nursing or temporary labor staff, that then there's an additional cost on their business. So we're starting to see some of those value points come through, even just in the early days of launching on-demand pay. So be interesting as we build and measure the momentum across our customer base and our community to see how actually we're able to support our customers to retain their people, and also make it much easier for them to be able to access the talent when they need it.
Have you noticed the same thing?
Pretty much. I agree with what the panel's saying on this. I think there's a wider issue in a sense, but I think that the fundamental is the same, absolutely.
Matt?
Yeah, I think fairly in agreement there.
What's the CIPP's position on pay on demand?
So it is relatively new, like Ted said. It's been around in various different guises. The thing that we always want to stress is that it's an employee benefit like any other, and that whether you implement it or not very much depends on your business. It's not going to be for every business. It's not one size fits all. But it should be a process of looking at what your benefit offerings is, what your employees want mainly. If they want it, go for it and see how you can implement it. But implement it responsibly. These sort of initiatives go hand in hand with education. Really believe that these sort of things can't work effectively if the education isn't built around it. And I think Wendy and Ted would agree. I hope they would agree. But if people don't understand how to properly utilise their cash flow and the funds that they have available to them, then offering them advances on their pay potentially could be detrimental. So you want to make sure that they're doing it in a responsible manner, and that's exactly what Ted and Wendy are sort of striving for, essentially.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, if I could just add to that, I would always make it conditional. So if you're looking at a small loan, then it's something slightly different. But if you're looking to pay people regularly or daily, then I think part of the condition should be you have that financial well-being education, which is run by the payroll or HR teams. So I see it as a condition, because otherwise it would just store up a problem.
The ideal situation, and I believe this is generally sort of how people have used, a lot of people sign up for these initiatives, but very few people actually make use of it. And that's the perfect situation. It's people wanting access if they need it, but not constantly accessing and constantly digging themselves into sort of a hole or a repetitive cycle of always needing access to that money. But the having access itself is not the bad thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And maybe can I contextualise a little bit? Sorry, I can give some actual real figures, because we do operate pay on demand in our organisation. So we've implemented towards the end of last year. So we've looked at the data to see what is it telling us up to the end of February. And I think we were really pleasantly surprised that about 80% of our workforce have actually registered for the service. About, I would say, 30% of people have streamed wages. The average amount is about £86 as it stands at the moment. And of course, the service that we offer has all the financial education, so people are using that. But also, we were pleasantly surprised to see how many people have actually started saving. So they've created savings pots. So at the end of February, the minimum saving pot sat at £44. So in the context of the industry that we are hospitality, I think we were pleasantly surprised to see that we have offered this benefit. Of course, we've acted responsibly with all the safeguards in place, but people actually have been quite responsible about it. We've seen the figures show us so far, people know what it is and they use it responsibly as another financial tool that enhances their well-being.
Lovely. Let's take some questions from the audience.
Hi everyone. So my question is around funders of early wage access. First question is, how are you educating these, where are you getting the funding from? And also, how are you educating the ecosystem, so benefit providers, whether it be healthcare or any other scheme? I think that education needs to happen, especially with the funders in particular.
Matt, would you like to start?
I will absolutely defer to Ted and Wendy on this one. As not being in operational payroll anymore, I'm sort of not really ingrained in this.
I think there's a wider education point here, and that if you take a simplistic mathematical calculation, it's self-financing. But that's something that's not understood or maybe not articulated well enough within the corporate environment. So there is, as Wendy said, there's actually a negative cost once you factor in the working capital. We're as an organisation really keen on inclusion, so I don't like a situation where some businesses can afford to do it, like yours, and some businesses can't, because that's inclusion, but not the right way round, or exclusion, excuse me. So we're working closely with organisations that can support any size of organisation. And then you get the benefit to the company, the individual. And I think that it's the education that needs to go all the way through. And it comes all full circle to the payroll industry is the only people that sit in between HR and finance that understand both aspects. But there's a need for thought leadership to articulate properly the working capital model.
Lovely. Wendy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add I can talk on behalf of Ceridian, right, and Dayforce, because we do real-time calculation for our payroll. So if somebody's worked a shift, as soon as they've clocked out, web clock, touch clock, signed off, that's immediately available for payroll. Payroll instant calculation, and that's how my children can literally calculate my payslip on the app. So, that real-time calculation, and then the extension of being able to draw down £10 to go and get sweeties for the kids, £100 for petrol. It's my choice to be able to draw that down rather than use savings or use a credit card. It's free for me to do it. So does it cost me anything? I don't need to. In fact, I forgot it was payday today because I've been so used to being able to draw down whenever I want. I forgot it was the end of the month. It was a nice bonus when I looked at the bank this morning. But the point here about the funding element is it's not impacting on our clients' cash flow. The payroll process, the payroll audit still continues because everything is automated. You see the full audit in the wallet. You see the full audit in the payslip, and those reconcile. So the employee, I can see myself, what I would see in my pay statement versus what I can see on my wallet app. And so those things it's my choice. It doesn't cost me a penny, and it doesn't impact on the cash flow of our customers when they're doing the actual process. The pay, if I was to draw down and I worked at Costa Coffee, an amazing customer of ours, if I worked at Costa Coffee and I drew down £10 to pay for my latte and a friend's latte, then that would go back to Ceridian's pot, and the rest of the net pay for the calculation of pay would go on payday. So I hope that helps just in terms of the funding aspect. And with regards to the education, 100%, you need to make that easy for people to understand, easy for them to know how to access information. And we have, as part of Dayforce, we actually have those support mechanisms that are already built into the technology there to be able to support employees and also managers and payroll professionals and HR professionals. So all of those things around being able to support financial well-being is something that's part of our offering.
Lovely. Thank you, Wendy.
I think the question from the audience was much more about the wider working capital thing, because there's a big difference between advancing £80 and paying £2,000 as you're going along. So I think there are different aspects to this, and I'm thinking that the banking community also has to help with this to help fund those to ensure inclusion.
Lovely. Okay. Let's move to a Slido question. Should pay on demand be limited to prevent employees spiralling with their spending? Anna.
Oh, good question. I mean, I'm a strong advocate for educating and empowering people to manage their pay rather than try to manage their money. And I think that's my viewpoint, is we need to treat employees as adults. We need to support them in ensuring they can understand financial well-being and they can understand the money that they have available, and they have access to tools to plan their disposable funds. However, I think if my fundamental principle is if somebody is desperate for money, they will find a way to find that money. And very often that money sits with extortionate interest rates, really unfavourable terms for them. So, if people are desperate for money, they will find a way. And I would rather us as an employer educate them how to access their earned wage responsibly, rather than to say, we're not going to give you access to this, you need to go and find your own way. Life happens for everybody. We've all been in situations when you needed money really quickly that you didn't have access to. And I see this, again, with the financial education in place. I think we need to empower our people to manage their money rather than restrict their access to their money.
Matt?
Absolutely, I completely agree. The education there is very important. From a technical point of view as well, there is a limit on how much you can take purely because of the necessary deductions that you'll need to make when you actually run the payroll. but that education piece is incredibly important. Just like Anna said, if someone needs the money, they'll get access to money, and if they're going to spiral, they're going to spiral. But what can you do as an employer? What can you do as a company to help people to not do that? And all those tools that you can offer go around this and support it, rather than just being there to access if they need it. It needs to be front and centre.
Lovely. Ted?
I think we talked about data, or I think both Anna and Wendy talked about data. I think it's a really useful tool to be able to see whether somebody possibly has a problem. So you can actually start to use education and the data to say, well, actually, this person should be able to go to the end of the month without drawing down 10 times, or this person's drawing down every day because actually they're trying to put food on the table. So I think there are different stratas of society, what they need, what they cater for. It's whether it's a nice to have or a essential. So there are lots of bits, but I think the data will drive how we educate.
You start getting, getting very sort of philosophical, where you sort of thinking, at what point as an employer do you need to step in and say, is there a problem, or is your duty to just pay the money? And having that data available to even just have the conversation to say, is there anything you need support with, is a very good stepping stone to be able to help people, rather than just being, we've paid you your money, that's our job done, because it's not. Like we said, payroll is between HR and finance. It's not just money and it's not just people. There's a mix, so we need to make sure that we're catering for all of that.
Lovely. Let's move to another question. Is pay on demand tax exempt, and would this land people in hot water with the tax man? Start with you,
I think Wendy wanted to answer that one. Sorry, Wendy.
Thanks, Ted. I'll take that one. Well, again, I'm only going to talk about Dayforce Wallet because I don't work with other on-demand pay organisations. As I explained earlier, you're getting a true gross to net calculation in real time. So because you're getting that, you can hold, all that's held, and it's only the net earned access. It's an extension of the payroll, is how we see Dayforce Wallet. And there's, to the discussion that you just had in the previous question, our customers can choose what they want. So if some of our customers have chose to only allow 50% of the net earned pay, then they have that control. And it was interesting, actually, because in our recent community forum that we had just a couple of weeks ago, one of our customers said, can I set my own threshold? So as as the head of payroll, we have chosen to have 50% of the net. But what if I wanted to further put another restriction so that I can't draw down any more than 25%? And we thought, oh, that's a really interesting concept. We've not thought about that. And so actually we're now exploring that as an opportunity, because we want our customers to help us to innovate, because if that's a good idea for one, which we also agreed on, then there's other people out there in the world that maybe could benefit from that idea. So our job is really to facilitate that level of innovation. So just with regards to that, it will never have an impact of being in hot water with the taxman, because the tax is already, along with the rest of the deductions to ensure compliance, that's already withheld, as we've done that through gross to net.
Lovely, Wendy, thank you. Let's take another question from the audience. Anyone? Yeah. Hello.
Hi. Is it just better to move from a lunar or monthly payroll to a weekly payroll for the pay on demand?
I think it all depends on the statutory reporting, because that is the showstopper for us paying people daily. In the UK at least, we can only pay people weekly. Whether that's the answer to pay on demand, I don't know. I am a strong advocate of empowering people to manage their finances. I'm an in-house payroll professional. I'm not selling anything. I'm not representing any company that's offering pay on demand. I am just a strong advocate on education, because if you educate people, if you enhance their financial well-being, I think it's going to touch every aspect of their life, not just their salary. It has a wider impact. So for me, I would say, rather than to find interim solutions, is to ride on this trend and to see how is it that we can, as a profession, better it? How can we safeguard people in the process whilst enhancing this opportunity to educate people to manage their pay? I think pay on demand will evolve. You know, it won't stay static as it is now. It won't be you can just draw down from your net pay. I think it will evolve over time, hopefully. I do believe in empowering people rather than to finding back way solution of restricting people's access to their pay.
Wendy, what do you think?
If you have a monthly payroll, you know, rather than having that additional payroll process and you offer on-demand pay, then, you know, it doesn't impact on the amount of work that you're doing as a payroll professional. But it allows the employee, if they want to have weekly or daily or, you know, at the end of the pay period, that they can draw down because they just need that extra tank of petrol before payday. You know, it doesn't impact on the operational team because the same process applies in terms of the actual cycle for pay. And the technology does the hard work for our customers that are in that payroll operations team. So, you know, it's a different concept in terms of, you know, go from monthly Luna, bi-weekly, weekly, but actually you can continue, if you operate monthly today, continue with operating monthly, and you put that choice in the employee's hands.